Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Weekly, where we discuss the latest in Israel's geopolitical developments. I'm Aaron Porras, and with me today in the studio are Dr. Martin Sherman, the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, and Professor Moshe Amirav from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Thank you both for coming back to the studio today. And today we'll begin with a discussion on the future of the Palestinian Authority as reunification talks between rival factions Hamas and Fatah begin to flounder. And then later we'll move our focus back to Israel, where the Knesset is getting ready to vote on a major legislation designed to protect the Israeli leadership from investigation. So starting with Gaza, reconciliation efforts between PA President Abbas's Fatah faction and the Hamas organization that rules over Gaza have hit a snag. New reports suggest that Hamas has little intention of handing over control of the Strip to the PA, despite real plans to do so. And furthermore, recent articles say that Hamas not only still retains control over roughly 95% of the Gaza territory, but is actually even actively blocking essential financial, administrative, and security measures required to legally transfer any control as promised. So it should come as no surprise then that the deadline for swapping security control in Gaza has come and gone, and that the unity talks have all but hit a complete standstill.
فقد طلبت حركتا فتح وحماس من الإخوة المصريين أن يتم تأجيل استكمال عملية تسلم الحكومة لمهامها في القطاع حسبما تم الاتفاق عليه في اتفاق القاهرة في 12/10/2017 بين الحركتين من 1/12 إلى 10/12، وذلك بهدف استكمال الترتيبات لضمان خطوات إنجاز المصالحة الوطنية التي يطمح لها شعبنا الفلسطيني.
So, Professor Amirav, I'm going to start with you. The move is delayed. Is there any reason to believe that Hamas and Fatah will be able to reconcile their differences by the new deadline?
We should, Israelis, be suspicious all the time. And we have to make sure that what's happening, first of all, we know what's going on. And then we have to, if you ask me, to support any agreement, because the agreement between Fatah and Hamas is working for us. If they don't agree, we will have trouble this way or another way. So I would say as an Israeli, my interest is that they will come to an agreement that will allow continuation of a peace process between us and the Palestinians. When I say Palestinians, it's both Hamas and the PLO and Fatah. And it looks to me that both sides are going to have an agreement because they need it. The situation in Gaza is the worst situation ever in terms of what's happening there. The electricity, the poverty, the situation is terrible. So I hope they will find a common ground for that.
Well, you know, the talks are floundering. I think it would be much more surprising if they were actually succeeding, because unlike in mathematics, when you put two negatives together, you don't get a positive. In politics, you get a bigger negative. And in many ways, I think focusing on these talks and giving them too much importance is like looking at the eddy currents in a river and losing sight of the overall flow of the river and see where the river is actually flowing. I think it completely exposes the invalidity, the lack of validity of the Palestinian claims to statehood and nationhood. You must remember that the Palestinians were given a state, or in the international community in Israel tried to foist a state on Israel beginning quarter of a century ago. And since then, the Palestinians have completely failed the test of history. The most they've been able to set up is a tyrannical theocracy in Gaza and Hamas, and a corrupt kleptocracy in Judea and Samaria. At some stage, people have to ask themselves, why isn't this happening? You know, there was a very interesting letter that was published in the Times of London in 1920, written by Lawrence of Arabia. He sent in a letter trying to justify or to support the Arab claim for independence. And he said, merit is no qualification for freedom. Freedom is enjoyed when you are so well armed or so turbulent or inhabit a country so thorny that the expense of your neighbors occupying you is greater than the profit. So if the only criteria for gaining independence is success, then the converse must be true as well. The only criteria for not deserving independence is failure. And the Palestinians have failed the test of history over and over again. They've given more opportunity than any other national movement in history to achieve independence, and they failed time and time again. And at some stage, I think the international community and Israel must face the fact that the Palestinians just can't cut it.
So, okay, so based on that same vein, many analysts, even within the Palestinian Authority, have said that perhaps the Palestinians simply aren't ready for reconciliation. And you were saying earlier how, no matter what, a peace, if they come to an agreement, any agreement, would be good for Israel. But at what cost? I mean, if Hamas doesn't give away anything and the Palestinians may or may not be ready, well, first I'll let you answer that. Are the Palestinians actually ready? Do you disagree with Dr. Sherman?
We are asking this question for many years. I remember some years ago, it's more than 10 years, I was with Prime Minister Barak in Camp David, and we were asking the same questions. Are the Palestinians ready? Are they ready to have a state the way we have?
And
the answer that my Prime Minister said is, yes, they are ready. Let's go and try. And we tried. And we failed.
And we see how
so what does it mean that we failed? We failed. You can say you can blame the Palestinians.
But you could argue that that was a less complicated time. Even you could possibly argue that even was a less complicated time, though, because at that time, Hamas had not kicked Fatah out of Gaza.
Right.
We had not pulled out of Gaza.
Right.
This is a much more tenuous situation. Now we have two factions who are literally militarily opposed to each other at times. So how do they reconcile? And if they do, how is that good for Israel?
I can bring you back to history again. When the State of Israel was established, we had the same situation as Hamas and Fatah.
Oh, really?
Same situation.
Really? That's a total distortion.
Total distortion. That's my opinion. It's not your opinion. And
it's not factually correct as well.
In this situation, in the end of the day, we came to a reconciliation, and the new state actually overcome all these fractions and tension, and we had a state. And I think this is the process the Palestinians are going through. They will have to have, in the end of the day, one weapon, one government, one parliament, and they will not have the situation they have now. They will have to agree. And another thing I would like to say, the Hamas is in a minority among
That's why
the
they won the
Palestinians.
elections. That's why they won the elections.
No,
and
they didn't win the election.
Even if they're in a minority,
they lost the election.
Even if no, they didn't lose the election.
They lose.
And even if they are in a minority, it's a big minority. It's 30 to 40 to 45%. So it's not as if it's a marginal group. At some stage, you have to stop trying to fit square pegs into round holes. I mean, to try and compare the state of Israel at its nascent stage to the Palestinians is ridiculous. Because even conceding that you were right, and I really think it's a very odious comparison. But even if you're right, it was over in a year or two. The Palestinians, what have the Palestinians had in their favor more than any other liberation organization? They've had wall-to-wall endorsement from the international media and the international community. They've had massive financial aid. They've had superpower endorsement. I'll remind you that when the Soviet Union was still in existence, there were more Palestinian offices of representation than there were Israeli embassies around the world. And they've had Israeli administrations for almost a quarter of a century who have not only have built the political credo on the issue of a Palestinian state, but they've tried to foist by every means a statehood on the Palestinians. And it's failed time and time and time again. What has to happen until the advocates of Palestinian state have managed to marshal intellectual integrity to say they were wrong?
I think we analyzed enough the past. Now we are in the current situation is that the majority of the Israeli people are, including the Prime Minister, are in favor of a Palestinian state. So in the end of the day, there will be a Palestinian state. Maybe next month, maybe in 10 years from now. But in the end, we know, all of us, we know it will be a Palestinian state. The question is, of course, if this state is going to be in a situation that they can take decisions, they have one gun, not many guns, and if they are ready to peace. This will be the test of the new Palestinian state that will be created in a year or 10 years, but everybody knows it will be here.
You know, I remember the same people making the same argument for cutting a deal with Assad on the Golan. Can you imagine if we'd accepted the advice of the enlightened, progressive sector of Israeli society? Today, you would have had ISIS and Al-Qaeda overlooking the Lake of Galilee and controlling the whole of the northern Israel. Now imagine what would happen if you had given up Judea and Samaria, the highlands overlooking the coastal plain, and you had Iranian presence there. What situation you would have? It would have been an impossible situation. Why would you prepare to take such a huge gamble and put your country and your countrymen at such huge risks? I cannot understand it. What else has to happen? What would be the criteria of failure?
Well, what I kind of want to get back to is you mentioned, you know, one gun and one future, one ideology for the Palestinian people, and how that will lead to statehood. But we're not seeing that right now, are we? You know, Hamas right now, one of the biggest sticking points is the Hamas military, which, again, as I stated earlier, all reports are essentially saying that there's no way they're going to give it up. But Fatah is saying you have to. Even the Fatah, security advisors are saying we can't even put our people in Gaza yet until they disarm because it's too much of a danger to us. Sure. So how do they fix that if it's
they will have to do it by force. I'm in the government, and it will be exactly as it was in Israel in 1948. The prime minister and the Israeli government said only one gun to all the Etzel and Lehi, all these terrorists who had guns, and all these guns became the guns of the state. And this is what exactly that will happen.
That's an absorption model where these different militaries and militias came into becoming one gun. But this isn't exactly that. This is more of a hostile takeover.
We will have to see if it is like that.
What would happen? What has to happen for you to be convinced?
I'm quite sure that in the end of the day, this is what will happen. I don't
Why?
know.
Why?
This is the only way. That's the only way that the Palestinian state can exist. Only if they have one government and one gun, and they understand it. It's not for me to understand. It's for them, and they understand it.
What's happening? In the same case in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen. Why don't they understand it there? So why do you think that the Palestinians who were part of the same Arab nation, as they claim in the first clause of the Palestinian National Covenant, why would they be any different from Lebanon? Why would they be any different from Syria? Why would they be any different from Libya? Why? What possible? When I was younger and thinner, one of my hobbies was free-fall parachuting, and twice the main parachute didn't open, which taught me a very good lesson. Hope for the best, but plan for the worst. So what are you basing your hope on? What are you basing your hope on? I can understand every time that the pro-Palestinian state people have made some kind of initiative, some kind of assumption. They've been proved wrong, but not just wrong, tragically wrong, and with fatal consequences. What will cause you to change your mind? Or is it an obsessive dogma?
I'll answer a very short answer, what I say to my students. As a professor in the university, you can study nothing from history. You can study nothing.
But never mind nothing.
It's not mathematics. It's not mathematics. There are many examples opposite to your case that I can bring. But this will be a whole lecture now. So all I can say is that from history, you study only one thing, that stupidity is always there, and we will have stupid people in the future here too, stupid Palestinians and stupid Israelis.
Maybe the people who are most stupid are the people who gave Gaza to the Palestinians. Maybe those are the most stupid people.
Well, unfortunately, we do have to move on, so we'll leave it at that. That's, I think, a good place. Now, the controversial investigations bill is set to go to a second vote soon, and both critics and opposition leaders are crying foul about the draft legislation. The bill is designed to prevent police from making recommendations on whether or not to indict in high-profile cases unless the Attorney General personally solicits such a recommendation. It would also punish any police officer with up to a year in prison for leaking a recommendation to the public. Zionist Union Party Chairman Yoel Chasson, however, says that this bill is designed only to obstruct investigations, while now opposition lawmakers are promising a fierce fight and even possibly a filibuster in order to prevent this bill from passing, while the people take to the streets to voice their issues too.
on Monday there is in the Knesset, in the parliament, there is this voting about the law that will actually castrate the police force and not enable them to do their job and be able to and allow the crooked politicians actually to hide all the things that are done there without any public transparency. So we're here to protest, hoping that we got as many people to let them know that we will not shut up.
זה חוק שבאמת תפור למעט מאוד אנשים. האנשים היחידים שיהנו ממנו זה פוליטיקאים, ראשי משפחות פשע, ופוליטיקאים שמתנהגים כמו ראשי משפחות פשע.
החוק כאן בא להגן על כל אזרחי מדינת ישראל בנושא של הפרסום, לא קשור לראש הממשלה.
All right, now, Dr. Sherman, we're going to start this topic off with you. What are your initial feelings on this legislation? Do you agree that it will necessarily protect our leaders from the court of opinion, or will it pave the way for dictatorial behaviors?
I don't think it will pave the way for dictatorial behavior. Look, I must admit that I'm not completely familiar with all the legal intricacies of this legislation. But as I was driving to the studio today on the news, I just heard that most of the air had been taken out of the balloon because Netanyahu has asked them not to include him or not to allow the law to apply to him in the current investigations, which was the basis of most of the protests when we saw the people protesting just a few minutes ago. So when you say it's the people was protesting, no, it was anti-Netanyahu people protesting. But basically, we have to separate out between the timing and the substance. You know, and I might agree that the timing might raise eyebrows, but there is a certain amount of logic to the substance because it comes to balance two different values. One is the value of the public to know, and the other is the value of the suspects, because there have been, as I understand it, most the recommendations of the police have been rejected by the prosecution even before the case comes to trial. And so in many cases, people are confronted with headlines that the police recommend that they be prosecuted, and the prosecution itself does not accept it. So there is a certain ring of logic and fairness to it, saying, well, you know, the police should investigate and the prosecution should prosecute, and one shouldn't enter into the other's field of authority. You know, in many ways, I think there's been a lot of political spin around this, and the whole law basically might have just arisen from what has been an ongoing decades of media assault on Netanyahu. You know, I'm not uncritical of Netanyahu in many fields, but I think it's completely undeniable that he's been a victim of very unfair press coverage over the years. And maybe that was the motivation for the law. That doesn't mean there isn't a certain amount of logic to it, to balance the right of the public to know and the right of the suspects not to be tried in the court of public opinion.
Professor?
Basically, I agree with you. I think that the main question is the timing. Why is it now? Why did they wait, the parliaments, for 50 years or more to come today to this conclusion or to this legislation? I mean, it's very clear. Everybody, every child in Israel knows why they did it now. There is no doubt about it.
But Netanyahu was asked to that it won't apply to him. So that's
Netanyahu asked, but it applies and it will apply to him.
How are you so sure? Why are you
Definitely. Definitely. Why is the whole mess? Why everybody is so nervous about it if it's not about him?
But so you would agree with the opponents that say, you know, this is definitely going to help him.
Everybody knows it. There is no one in Israel who doesn't know why it happens now when the prime minister is going to court. There is no one who doesn't know why. Why now? Why not a year ago?
So, but then does that bother you if fundamentally you agree with the basis for the law?
No, it bothers me as a political scientist who looks at the arena not from the right or to the left. We have a situation in which a prime minister is promoting, it doesn't matter what he says, we know what he does. He's promoting a law that will save him from jail. That's the situation.
It doesn't affect the judiciary. It doesn't affect the evidence that they bring to the trial.
So why are they so nervous, all of them? Why are they so nervous?
As I say before, because of the leaks, because of the press spin, because of trying people in the court of public opinion and not giving them a fair trial in front of the judiciary.
But why are they so afraid?
No, but why, if you trust the judiciary, why would this affect the outcome? The way it's not affecting the evidence that's brought to the judge. It's not affecting the way the trial is conducted. All it is saying
But
that the police.
Why now?
I agree.
Today? Why today?
Well, as
why not 20 years ago or 10 years
Good
from
question.
now?
Well, another interesting question to note is, why, not only why today, but why is it being so aggressively pursued? Because just not long ago, you had people on the commission on the first vote to say, yeah, let's not apply it to Netanyahu, and then those people were, even Likudnikim, were removed and replaced with co-sponsors of the bill.
So it's obvious. Every child can see it, why they do it. It's so clear.
But then again, does the bill obstruct in any way the police's ability to investigate or the Attorney General's ability to indict?
Yes, of course.
Why? How?
Of course. Politically, it's when it will happen, let me tell you, there will be many journalists who will go to jail because they are going to publicize
Journalists?
it. Yes. They are going to put it to the media. I spoke with many of them who said it will be open because this is a democracy, Israel, and it will stay a democracy. And in this democracy, everything is open. We will not wait to the judge to deal with it for another 2 years. This is the idea that Netanyahu has.
But the law
it will never happen.
The law doesn't apply to journalists. It applies to the police who leak. It's people who leak from inside the investigation. Now, I don't know whether you're for or against leaks, but basically, leaking from investigation is betraying the trust that you're given. You shouldn't leak.
No, the only question is why now? Why today?
Okay,
can you answer on that?
No, but so let's suppose you're right that the motivation was
what's the motivation?
The ongoing media harassment of Netanyahu. Okay, I mean, the leaks and leaks and leaks, and the media's blowing it up and blowing it up, as if you really care how many cigars Netanyahu gets. But the motivation may be the ongoing media assault against Netanyahu, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a basic justification of this kind of legislation. So, would you oppose the law if it was raised next year?
I mean the timing is very suspicious.
But that's the whole point. Everybody's got a Netanyahu phobia.
I think one of the another issue that many people may have forgotten about even was the fact that in Israel, as opposed to other states that have similar legislation, Israel doesn't have a term limit. I think that will pave any way to obstructing justice or corruption.
No, I don't
That's
think
a legal
so.
situation.
That's
We are
situation.
speaking now about the mood of the
so.
public, and the public today understand. You will ask everybody in the street. He will understand this is what Netanyahu is doing, not under his name. He's trying to make it a kind of subject that has nothing to do with him. But that's bullshit.
How is that going to affect the outcome of the investigation? The fact that it won't be published in the newspaper? So what you're saying is that the judiciary can't reach a fair verdict unless it's backed up by the media?
Well, we'll have to leave that.
We will see. We will see.
We'll have to leave it there and wait until next time to explore that topic. So final thing is the final word, the silver lining. Who would like to start us off?
Well, the silver lining. The silver lining, I think, is that Israel has made very clear that it will not tolerate Iranian presence on the Golan, and I hope the message is sunk in.
It's not many times that I agree with him. I agree with him.
All right, well, that's a very short silver lining. I can appreciate that. All right, that's all the time we have today for this edition of ILTV's Israel Weekly. Thanks again to our two guests, Dr. Sherman and Professor Amirav, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. See you next week, and shalom from Israel.